wanted to kind of give you guys been getting some messages from friends about Taiwan, and we've been telling you guys, I don't know what, 2-3 months now, that China's going to invade Taiwan and take Taiwan down. Well, that is happening, or going to happen, I should say, not happening as of yet. But there are other news sources now that are saying that China is amassing troops, amassing mainly ships, I shouldn't say troops, but ships with troops on it, all in the area there for an attack on Taiwan. I did get a little bit of information recently in a meeting I was in about that issue, and my question was twofold. One, whether or not, of course, we know Taiwan has nuclear weapons. So at this point, because we can't really discuss that on here, so it will be through Israeli News Live iConnect, where you have freedom of speech. So I encourage you to go to iConnectFX.com. Definitely get subscribed to our channel there. It's in about 12 different languages on that channel now. Not every video is uploaded that way, but important videos we are uploading there. So I encourage you to go there, get that. You'll also see it on our website, IsraeliNewsLive.org. The interview that we're doing tomorrow is very, very important, very, very vital. Give you some hint, the person we're interviewing actually knows Fauci. Interesting, huh? So that ought to make for an interesting interview. And as well, if you appreciate the work we do, support the broadcast, support the ministry. Got some very interesting teachings I'm going to be doing also here. Actually, before the weekend gets here, I'm planning on trying to do one here maybe by Friday, maybe Saturday if the latest. But anyway, I want to share those things with you, things that are going on. And what else I wanted to, yes. If you have not listened to the interview with Brother Gary Lowry from last night, take the time to listen to that. It's a very important interview. It's very controversial, and but keep in mind, because some people are critical and they say, gosh, we're supposed to, at the name of Jesus, we can rebuke anything and everything.
No, boy, not that name. That's the devil. We are away from that name.
But don't forget, God also seemed to be pleased that Job could be tested. And we know that Daniel, he was praying earnestly, and when the angel...
And Italy, as police clash with protesters over the tightening of COVID restrictions. There are mass demonstrations engulfing France, Germany and Italy as police clash with protesters over the tightening of COVID restrictions. There are reports that one protester too in Germany has collapsed and died later in hospital. Since early July, daily infection cases in Western Europe have remained relatively low, but they are still on the rise.
These protests across Western Europe, particularly in France and Italy and here in Germany, as well, as people are unhappy with COVID restrictions that are being put in place, and particularly when it comes to requirements or potential requirements for what's being called the EU Green Digital Pass, a digital vaccine certificate, if you will. Now, those demonstrations across Western Europe, they turned nasty at times over the weekend.
We are civilians. We just want our basic rights back, and they are the ones armed who are taking action against peaceful civilians. The Geneva Convention was passed in 1949, and they are negating it.
I am here to defend freedom of speech because Emmanuel Macron is trying to stifle any kind of public speech into a pseudo-privilege called the sanitary pass, which is in fact a way to control people.
Well, the EU Green Pass has caused much uproar, particularly in France, where over 200,000 people across the country came out onto the streets to vent their unhappiness. It was a much smaller affair here in Berlin, around 5,000 people coming out. That's after the courts here in Germany said that the demonstration couldn't go ahead as it was the potential to be a super spreader event for COVID-19. Those that did come out onto the streets of the German capital were met by riot police who were backed up with water cannons.
We've carried out around 500 arrests in relation to, among other things, violations of the ban on assembly, but also to violations of the infection protection measures, as well as acts of resistance and physical assaults on emergency forces.
Well, in France, health union bosses are calling on Emmanuel Macron to make vaccination mandatory. They say that a digital health pass isn't going to cut it when it comes to trying to stop cases rising in the country, and they want the French president to go as far as making sure that everybody must have a jab. That's not the message that's coming out from here in Germany. There's no talk of mandatory vaccinations. But what we've heard from Markus Söder, the leader of the state of Bavaria, senior politician in the ruling coalition here, he's been saying that you don't have to get a vaccination, but if you don't, you won't have access to many things.
Anyone who is fully vaccinated will get back their rights. What is needed now are clear lines so that we don't blunder into autumn. Those who have been offered vaccination and consciously rejected it will no longer be tested for free.
Well, compared to countries like the United States and the United Kingdom, cases of COVID-19 across Western Europe remain low. However, they are rising. And here in Germany, the Robert Koch Institute, the federal institute that looks after public health and disease control, is already warning that we may be on the cusp of a fourth wave of COVID-19.
The month of August has just started, and for millions of Americans, so did a nightmare. A day of reckoning has arrived for renters all across the nation. Almost 1 year ago, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention issued a moratorium that protected millions of renters who became unable to keep up with their monthly rent payments. But the moratorium has officially ended, and now billions of dollars in back rent must be paid. For some, this means that they have to come up with almost an entire year of rent in only a few weeks to avoid getting evicted. However, for the millions that simply cannot afford to pay what they owe, this means that they can effectively lose their homes any time now. This situation has been building up for several months, and now it is rapidly evolving into a major national disaster. Welcome to America's Eviction Horror Show. Up until now, there doesn't seem to be any hope of preventing the most devastating eviction tsunami in the story of the United States. While some are still desperately hoping Congress to issue an extension of the moratorium, at this point, that does seem very unlikely. The truth is that this unfortunate day would have to arrive sooner or later. After all, actually hurting ever since the CDC order was put into place. Some of them reported that they haven't collected rent for nearly 1 year, which has also compromised their abilities to keep up with utilities, maintenance, and their own mortgage payments. Even though the order intended to keep a roof above the heads of millions of families amid what was the worst economic recession since the Great Depression of the 1930s, which was then triggered by a ravaging health crisis, it financially has burdened 10 million small landlords who became responsible for solving a housing crisis caused by government policies overnight. Many housing advocates argue that the moratorium was a quick fix that exonerated the government from handling the situation responsibly by passing on that liability to landlords who used to live paycheck to paycheck. All in all, 12.7 million households are at the brink of eviction, and given that many of them house several family members, the estimated number of people that can be ultimately pushed to the streets is in a range of 40 million. And that's according to a study by the Aspen Institute. Lower-income households are disproportionately more at risk of facing eviction, as they're less likely to have savings to pay rent and more likely to have been employed in industries that were severely affected by the virus crisis. It's from a myriad of health issues, including respiratory problems and a bone disorder, and now is one of the millions fearing homelessness. Her landlord, who first tried to evict her in January, has refused to accept federal rental assistance, so the only thing preventing him from changing the locks and pushing her out of the apartment she lives in was the CDC moratorium. Her $800 monthly disability check is just not enough for a new apartment. She has only $1,000 in savings. I've got anxiety. I'm nervous. I can't sleep, revealed Schaefer of West Warwick, Rhode Island, over fears of being thrown out on the street. Limited. We're going to see a higher proportion of people go to the streets than we normally see. That is extremely unfortunate, Randall lamented. Even more alarming is the fact that this crisis is bound to get a lot worse in September, when the first foreclosure proceedings are expected to begin. Approximately 1.75 million homeowners, which account for roughly 3.5% of all homes, are in some type of forbearance plan with their banks, according to the Mortgage Bankers Association. But the official U.S. government data indicates that 5.9 million homes are not current with their mortgage payments, while 8.7 million homeowners said they have little or no confidence in their ability to pay their mortgage next month, which puts 7.4 million tenants who are in rental properties that are not current with mortgage payments in danger of eviction too, regardless of having paid rent or not. As soon as these proceedings start, we are going to see a tragedy of unimaginable proportions. The more the government pushed back the expiration of the moratorium, the more it allowed the scale of this tragedy to become even larger. It's almost unfathomable. We are on the precipice of a nationwide eviction crisis that is entirely preventable, Benfer argued. The eviction moratorium is the only thing standing between millions of tenants and eviction, while rental assistance applications are pending. When that essential public health tool ends on Saturday, just as the Delta variant surges, the situation will become dire, she warned.